What's going on, everybody? Jolt here from the Token Minorities, and I'm here with NPL Season 6 Week 9 against my good friend and longtime rival Togevoir and the coach of the Arizona Carvanhas. Now, he is having a pretty good season so far. He is 5-3 with a very positive differential. He has some really big wins this season, and his team is pretty nasty as well. As you can see, he has Clefable, Weavile, Mega Venusaur, Latias, Electros, Lucario, Tentacool, Bronzong, Haxorus, Seismitoad, and Staraptor. So as you can see, he actually picked up the Latias that we dropped at the end of last week. We made that trade with him, where he actually also picked up our Electros. So we traded we traded the Latias and the Electros for his Thundurus T and Gothitelle. So we're the ones that made the trade. Now we go against each other the very next week. And in doing the trade, my matchup went from almost unwinnable to very winnable. In fact, it might even be slightly in my favor. It kind of depends on prep on both ends, as I do have a lot of ways to deal with this team, as he has a lot of ways to deal with mine as well. So it's going to be a really fun matchup for sure, and I'm excited for that. But before we go any further, make sure to check out the description below, as you'll be able to see the link to Togevoir's channel. Very high quality content creator in my opinion, especially as a battler. He is very fun to watch because of how skilled he is. So give him a look, you will not be disappointed. Now let's talk about the matchup a little bit, as he has a couple huge threats to my team. Most notably is the Weavile, as if you look through my roster, I have nothing that really, I don't think anything on my team actually can avoid a 2-hit KO from Banded Weavile, and most of my team can't avoid a 2-hit KO from Life Orb Weavile either. So Weavile offensively is a very big threat, but I do feel like I can build a team that isn't as scared of it by means of things like priority and just outspeeding it, as Weavile's speed tier is below that of Talonflame and Mega Lopunny, as well as many of my potential Scarfers. So I definitely have ways to deal with it in that regard, but I also have a couple mons that can give us some trouble. Most notably, the combination of Azumarill and Ferrothorn give it a lot of trouble, as it forces him to run certain coverage moves, meaning that he's less likely to be able to run Pursuit, which would be really good for things like my Gothitelle. So Weavile really is in a pickle in terms of the 4-move slot syndrome, as it wants to run things like Ice Shard, obviously, to pick off my Mega Lopunny. It wants to run Icicle Crash to hit my Gastrodon, and to hit things like my Mandibuzz. It wants to run Knockoff for general utility, as Knockoff is the best move in the game, maybe outside of Scald. Not sure which one's really better now after the burn nerf, but regardless, it also wants to run Poison Jab for the Azumarill, as well as Low Kick for the Ferrothorn. So it's got a lot of moves it wants to run. It can't run all of them, and that's one thing I can also take advantage of in my building, or at least think about a little bit as I am building my team. So Weavile, I would say, is the biggest offensive threat against me, but also Lucario is kind of annoying, as something like an agility set could be a pretty big problem for my team, especially because he is obviously able to outspeed my Mega Lopunny after an agility, and quite frankly is able to set up on things like my Mandibuzz and my Ferrothorn. So it might be in my best interest to not bring those kinds of mons in this matchup, just so that things like Lucario can't get free setup opportunities and give me a really hard time, as even just Extreme Speed coming off of a Life Orb Swords Dance variant is really hard for my team to deal with. So definitely not in the business of letting Lucario get out of hand. So that's something I'm thinking about as well. Offensively, Haxorus, of course, is also a problem, mainly because of its Z-move eligibility, making it able to OHKO things like my Ferrothorn with a Z Low Kick, as well as just generally doing a million with Z Outrage if he decides to bring that. Just a standard Dragon Dance set, I feel it's scary against my team. I don't think it really has much sweeping potential, because I do have a lot of good checks to it, as well as just a lot of things that make it kind of difficult for Haxorus to set up. So it's not the biggest threat in the world, but definitely something he could bring. But defensively is where his team really shines, in my opinion, and that is with things like Clefable and Latias, as that core is ridiculously disgusting, and then you couple that with Mega Venusaur, so that is not something I want to deal with, but I do feel like I have good assets on my team to help with that, as my Metagross specifically has coverage, the capacity to run coverage to hit all of that, and I don't really necessarily need the ice coverage for the Latias, as Latias doesn't particularly take Meteor Mashes from an adamant Metagross well at all. So Metagross is looking like a really nice win condition this week in terms of my offenses. So that's all I really want to say at this stage. Let's hop on over to the team builder, and before I jump into this, I do want to give a big shout out to my buddy the Flying Bird, as he did help me a lot with this team, especially with the initial core. I'll also try to remember to link his channel in the description below. Give him a look as well. He's a high quality draft player as well. So The core that Bird suggested was Azumarill, Gothitelle, Mega Lopunny, which is definitely something that's solid against him, as that combination means that with his best counter to Azumarill being the Mega Venusaur, Gothitelle obviously deters that, and for that reason he might not even bring Mega Venusaur. I still think he probably will, because he just straight loses to Azumarill, like a Banded Azumarill, if he doesn't have a pivot like Mega Venusaur. Even, not just Bandit, even like a Life Orb Azumarill that can switch up its attacks is a huge threat to him if he doesn't bring Mega Venusaur. So I think he's forced to do that, making this combination of Bandit Azumarill plus Gothitelle really threatening. And then coupling that with the fact that I'm running Mega Lopunny this week, that'll put a lot of pressure on his defenses, and I think he's going to really struggle to be able to wall this out, as I'm not really expecting an offensive build from him. He does have the necessary defensive components to give my team a hard time, but this team is built to combat those defensive components and be able to manage the offensive components as best as possible. Obviously, I'm going to be a little bit weaker to his offensive stuff because of how this team is built, but I feel like he's going to take a more defensive route against my team. It just makes the most sense on paper. So that's what we're thinking about moving forward. And this Azumarill obviously is Choice Bandit, as you can see. It does have speed investment to outpace a uninvested Clefable, as I would like to be able to pummel a Clefable if it's like a Calm Mind variant with a lot of defense investment, which is what I anticipate this week. More defensive Clefable to be able to avoid a 2-hit KO from Mega Lopunny's return. That's what I expect, and this will outspeed that and be able to do a million with a Banded Play Rough. He does not want to take that attack at all, so he'll be essentially forced to switch into Venusaur, making Gothitelle all the more threatening. And then once Venusaur is trapped and gone, Azumarill just gets kills every single day of the week. So definitely a pretty cool set to bring here. Aqua Jet, for obvious reasons, return is really good neutral coverage against his team, mainly to hit the Mega Venusaur. For whatever reason, I'm not able to trap it with Gothitelle, as Banded Return still does a lot to Mega Venusaur. Obviously a little less so if he's going to be a Max Fizz Depth variant, which is definitely a possibility, but there's also a chance that he runs a more speedy Mega Venusaur to outpace a max speed Azumarill, as otherwise I could see a Belly Drum Azumarill or even just a 4 attacks fast Azumarill giving him a lot of trouble as well with Natural Gift Flying or Natural Gift Psychic. So I am expecting a Venusaur to be at 219 speed, just enough to outpace a max speed Azumarill. That's why I'm running more bulk on this set, as well as a couple other tricks that I will show here in a little bit. So that's all I have to say on the Azumarill. Next up is the Gothitelle. This set is designed to obviously trap the Mega Venusaur, as well as trap things like Seismitoad and Bronzong, and what else could be trapped by this? Mainly those. Mainly Venusaur, Bronzong, and the Seismitoad, as none of those are able to 3-hit KO me unless they run things like Explosion on Bronzong or like an offensive Life Orb Seismitoad. It doesn't even have to be Life Orb, but like a Rain Dance Seismitoad, that'd be able to take this on. Venusaur has to be physical to be able to take me out in 3 hits, so otherwise I can just Calm Mind up in its face and put myself in a pretty nice position for sure. And the combination of Culpa Berry plus Hidden Power Fighting is there to lure in the Weavile, which could definitely be useful for things like my Metagross to sweep late game, as Metagross of course is threatened by the potential knockoff, but as you'll see here soon, I do have Bullet Punch on it, so that does help. Bullet Punch is not an Oko, however, so it makes me a lot more free to just attack with Metagross instead of make myself have to boost my attack, which I'll talk about more in a little bit. Get a little ahead of myself. We'll get to there in a second. But this overall obviously is here to trap, get rid of Mega Venusaur and his defensive threats, and allow my Mega Lopunny and Azumarill to do their thing. Again, I am speed creeping the anticipated speed on his Mega Venusaur of 219, so I just want to make sure I can outpace that and do my job. Next up is the Mega Lopunny. This set is designed to just be a general offensive nuisance for him, as with my Gothitelle doing his job and with Azumarill breaking him down as I do anticipate it doing, this can put in a lot of work, as the combination of Iron Gel, High Jump Kick, Return hits his entire team very hard outside of the Mega Venusaur. Gothitelle's got that covered for me, and Fake Out to deal with his likely Scarfers. He might bring a Scarf Haxorus, that's definitely a possibility. He's brought that several times this season. I also could see Scarf Staraptor being a thing, and that would be something that Fake Out would be useful for as well. It's just nice to have Fake Out in general for a little bit of priority just in case. It's always nice to have those bailout buttons. So yeah, this overall is really solid against him, I believe, and it is outspeeding a max speed Weavile. So that is the offensive core. The rest of the team is built to support that. We're going to start that off with another breaker and something to help deal with the Latias. That is the Metagross. So Metagross, a leftovers variant with max HP. It's a tank set with enough speed to outpace the anticipated Mega Venusaur speed spread. and then the combination of Meteor Mash, Zen Headbutt, and Bullet Punch does a lot of work to his team. The only thing, believe the only thing on his team that hard walls that is the Bronzong, but Bronzong's not doing much to a tank Metagross set, and even so, I can always switch in things like my Nidoking, things like my Gastrodon, and things like even my Gothitelle on the Bronzong if I need to, and that will essentially remove the threat or continue to weaken it down to the point where it will not be able to switch into +1 Meteor Mash anymore. And I really do see this put in a lot of work this week, as he just doesn't have a whole lot for it, to be honest. His team is very, very weak to the combination of Psychic and Steel coverage, especially from something that's this powerful. And quite honestly, even though the team is built around the core of Azumarill, Mega Lopunny, Gothitelle, this is probably the biggest win con, as he has so little to deal with it. It can break through his team, and I just really anticipate him struggling to be able to beat this in addition to everything else. So definitely looking forward to seeing how this mon plays out this weekend. Next up is my Weavile switch-in, the only real one I could put on my entire team. That is this Gastrodon with Sticky Hold and Rocky Helmet, as with max defense, I am not 2-hit KO'd by a Life Orb Jolly Weavile, and just kind of thinking about the speed tiers a little bit, so I feel like he's forced to run Jolly Weavile. Now, this set does not avoid a 2-hit KO all the time from an Adamant Weavile that has a boosting item like a Life Orb or a Choice Band. That said, I don't expect Adamant Weavile, because Adamant Weavile will not outpace a Choice Scarf Gothitelle. So he has to run a Jolly Weavile to outpace Choice Scarf Gothitelle, meaning that this set should be able to avoid the 2-hit KO. The only exception, I suppose, being if he is Jolly Choice Banded, in which case there is a small chance that a Icicle Crash can 2-hit KO me. It is a very small chance, and if he does get the flinch or gets that chance, then that kind of sucks, but it's actually not the end of the world, because I do have the likes of Azumarill, Mega Lopunny, and the Metagross to give it a hard time, like to check it well as the Gothitelle, which might be able to lure it. So I think I have a lot of ways to deal with Weavile. I just felt that it was essential to have that guaranteed switch in, or essentially guaranteed switch in to it, just in case, as it is the biggest offensive threat. Plus, Rocky Helmet is really nice for the Haxorus as well as for the Lucario, and that's why I have Earth Power Ice Beam as my coverage, and it's also nice for the Staraptor so that it doesn't get free U-turns, even though I do have the Metagross that hard walls. Metagross is a win con, so I don't want to always let it take the hit, and potentially a final Gambit as well, which would be pretty bad. So yeah, Gastrodon's basically the glue for this team, and we'll just kind of see how that goes. So then finally is my rocker. That is the Nidoking. This is a breaker and a rocker, kind of the typical role Nidoking has filled on my team this season. Earth Power and Flamethrower hit most of his team very hard, and then I'm left without coverage for things like Latias and for Clefable, so obviously Poison type coverage is the call in that last slot. That said, I do believe Poison Jab is better than Sludge Wave in this matchup because of the likelihood of Calm Mind Clefable trying to set up on my team. I don't know if he's really going to bring a set of Clefable, but it's just nice to have Poison Jab just in case that's what he wants to do. Plus, Poison Jab hits Latias a little bit harder as well as a potential Assault Vest, or maybe the Electros if he brings that. If that's an Assault Vest set, Poison Jab will 2-hit KO most Electro spreads. So that's pretty good here. Rocks for obvious reasons, as that'll help me wear down his offensive threats and help put his defensive stuff in range of Mega Lopunny and in range of Azumarill and Metagross. So that is the team. It's a pretty cool team for sure. I think it's going to work well. I don't really... No, that's all I have to say. It's a good team. So let's just go ahead and hop on over to the battle, and we'll see how this goes down. So as you can see, we got a pretty cool new background, so that's pretty cool. But yeah, so he brought the Latias, the Weavile, the Bronzong, Electros, Mega Venusaur, and Clefable. So he brought all the fat and the Weavile, which is basically what I expected. So I'm glad I was able to accurately predict that, as if he had brought Hyper Offense against this particular build, it might have been a little bit harder of a time for me. But we're in a pretty good position here at Team Preview. So in terms of the lead matchup, I'm expecting him to lead with a rocker, as I did not bring hazard removal on this team, as you can see, and my only hazard removal now is Mandibuzz, which kind of sucks. Mandibuzz didn't have the best matchup. It's not a bad matchup by any means, but it's not the best, as he does have the Weavile and the Clefable, both of which are threats that I would rather not have to deal with, to be honest. So, or at least I wouldn't really want them to have free switch-ins. That's more the deal there. So I didn't bring hazard removal, and that means that I'm expecting him to lead with his rocker and to click rocks turn 1 no matter what. So I am going to lead with my best anti-lead to Bronzong, which I feel is my Nidoking. So that is what I'm going to do, and let's just go ahead and hop on into this and see if we can take down Togevoir. So I decided to lead off with my Nidoking as he decides to lead off with his Bronzong. So I did get the lead prediction correctly, as now I'm going to go for the Flamethrower, expecting him to go for the Stealth Rock, as he actually goes straight for the Psychic, which I thought was kind of an interesting play, as because I don't have any hazard removal, I felt that he would just go straight for the hazards. But then again, looking at my team, I guess I'm not that weak to hazards at all, as the Azumarill and really only the Azumarill and Gothitelle take less than minimum damage from the Stealth Rock, so that's a thing. But I do just go for Flamethrower. It looks like a 2-hit KO, so that's pretty good for sure. As now I'm going to fire off another Flamethrower as he decides to go into his Electros, revealing that that is indeed an Assault Vest variant, and based upon that damage, I think he has max HP, but most likely going to take 1,000,000 from this Poison Jab, and that's exactly what happened. So I lose my Nidoking here. Not the worst thing in the world, though, because I am able to sufficiently weaken the Bronzong as well as weaken the Electros, both of which are now in range of Mega Lopunny. So Mega Lopunny is already looking like a really good win con in this game, as if I get a little more damage on Latias as well as trap the Mega Venusaur and get a little damage on Clef, it just cleans up the entire game. So I'm looking in a pretty good spot here already on turn 3 for Mega Lopunny. Now let's continue, as I'm going to go into my Mega Lopunny and just click return, as he has no switch-ins to it. He can go back into Bronzong if he wants, and then he can just die to the following jump kick. So I know he's going to leave it in. I'll go ahead and get my kill, and I'll go into his Clefable to try to revenge kill me, and I will pause. Now, this play is pretty big, and I have one play. My only play here is to stay in an Iron Tail, because if I were to switch into something like, my best switch in here would be my Metagross, alternatively, and if I go into my Metagross and he fires off a Fire Blast, maybe even an offensive Life Orb Fire Blast, I could lose my win condition. Metagross is still my top win con. Looking at his team, all he has for period is the Bronzong, and that's already below 50%. That is not taking 2+1 Meteor Mashes. That's not really a counter anymore to Metagross at all. So Metagross is a huge win con. I'm not going to go straight into Metagross. My play here is to click Iron Tail, because by going for Iron Tail, he is going to be put, probably if he's a defensive variant, he's going to be put at a little under 50%. If he's leftovers, might be right at 50%. And if he's a defensive variant, that means he will not be able to take me out with Moonblast, meaning I can fire off another Iron Tail and get my kill. So leaving Mega Lopunny in is probably my best play, assuming he's defensive. If he's offensive, again, I don't want to switch out into Metagross because I might die to Fire Blast, so I stay in regardless and click Iron Tail, even though that means I might lose my Lopunny here, as it's much more important to me to get the Clefable weakened, making my Metagross's job, making my Azumarill's job, making really my entire team's job a lot easier. So I also don't want him to get carried away with like Cosmic Powers and stuff, because I don't really have a whole lot to deal with that, especially considering the fact that I just lost my Nidoking here in the early game. So we're going to go ahead and click Iron Tail, and we get the critical hit. So I would not have taken him out there, and that actually really sucks for him, and I'll talk more about the crit here at the end of the battle, as that was definitely a big deal. So here I'm going to fire off the return, as I'm expecting him to potentially try to pull a double, expecting my Gothitelle. I thought he might try to double into his Latias or into his Weavile on that turn, and overall there's no way that he can take me out in one hit with a Sludge Bomb. So return was my best play, as I don't really necessarily need all the health on the Mega Lopunny as long as I stay above 50% in case of a high jump kick miss. So I was okay with taking any damage here, and I was more so expecting him to pull a double into Latias or Weavile anyway. So going to go for the return as he fires off his Sludge Bomb. Fortunately, he does not get the poison, as this means I'm now going to remain out of range of dying to my own recoil from a high jump kick just in case. And now on this turn, I am going to go ahead and pull the double into my Gothitelle, expecting him to probably try to recover up, expecting a return, as he actually fires off a knockoff. So I'm going to talk about this briefly. So the only reason to fire off a knockoff on that turn is if he is expecting Gothitelle or Metagross to come in. It's hard to know if it's hard to determine from the battle if his response to an incoming Gothitelle was to knock off or to double. I'm not sure what his response was intended to be. He might have just been predicting Metagross, but I'm assuming that I'm kind of making an assumption that he predicted Gothitelle to come in there, because I feel like Gothitelle's a pretty logical switch in on that turn. That just makes the most sense to me. I'm not going to want to let my Metagross get weakened when it's a very obvious win condition against this team right now. So I'm going to go hard into Gothitelle. His response was to knock off the incoming Gothitelle, so for the context of what I'm going to talk about later, remember that play, as that is something that will be discussed in a bit. So I'm going to go ahead and fire off a Psychic, as he's going to just go for the Sludge Bomb, getting a little damage off on Goth. I considered trying to Calm Mind up in his face, since it looks like he can't really touch me. And if I were to Calm Mind up in his face, I could quite honestly get all the way to +6, but there's really no point in doing so whenever he does have the Weavile on the back. Excuse me. So I'm just going to go ahead and take him out here, and expecting him to go into Weavile, we'll just sack off my Gothitelle and click Hidden Power Fighting just in case he decides to get greedy and go for a Swords Dance in my face. So clicking Hidden Power Fighting here, I do go down to the knockoff, and that's all she wrote for Gothitelle. Now here I'm going to go into my Lopunny and basically claim my next kill, as I can just click Return, get kill anything, as he decides to go into his Bronzong. Again, I'm somewhat expecting him to have Protect on this, but it doesn't really matter to me if he does, as all it means is that I can just go for the high jump kick, and if I happen to miss, I'm still alive. I can click it again and get my kill. If he goes Weavile, I still have Gastrodon at full health, and that should be okay no matter what. So I'm going to click high jump kick. Fortunately, I do land. He does not have the Protect, and down goes the Bronzong. Now it goes into his Latias. My best play is to attack it just to weaken it, help put it in range of Metagross, as Metagross is looking like it could definitely clean up this game, as I just fire off the Return as he fires off a Psychic, and if I were trying to preserve differential, I could have gone hard into my Metagross, but it's just not worth it, as there's still the possibility, this is a Z eligible mon on his team, there's still a possibility that it is a Z Ghost, Z Shadow Ball, and that would kill my Metagross, and that's not something I'm going to risk. Metagross is the obvious win condition. I'm going to scout it out with my Azumarill first, as there's also a strong possibility that he has some sort of Z move like Z Energy Ball or Z Thunderbolt or Z Thunder even to hit my Azumarill, and that's just a possibility that I'm thinking about. So I'm going to scout that out here, potentially sacrifice a differential just in case he is able to take out my Metagross with a Z Shadow Ball, as that's not something I can afford to let happen, as I need Metagross to win the game. So Azumarill's more expendable, and if he doesn't have something that can OHKO Azumarill, then I just get a kill, and actually I might just win the game. I think I might be able to just win the game with Azumarill if he's not Poison Jab Weavile. So that was also a thought going through my mind, as I am going to stay in and click Play Rough as he reveals the Z Power, which happens to be Z Thunderbolt. This was a roll. Actually, it was a roll in my favor to survive. It was basically a 50-50. It was about a 60-40 in favor of my survival, but he does get the roll and takes out my Azumarill there. Not the worst thing in the world. It would have come down to, I believe, the same differential anyways, as I would have sacked off my Azumarill to Weavile. So I'm going to go ahead and lose my Azumarill, go into Metagross, and here I'm going to go ahead and click the Meteor Mash just in case he does not have Roost on this set. He revealed to be bulky set already, so I'm kind of expecting Roost, but I'm going to go ahead and fire off the Meteor Mash, and I'm expecting him to Roost again. I click Home Claws, and that will essentially be GG, as now the Weavile is in range of Bullet Punch, as well as this Latias being in range of Meteor Mash plus Bullet Punch from a +1 Metagross. I get the attack boost here just to add insult to injury, and we're going to clean this game up with Bullet Punch. So that was a game that, I mean, it was well played on both ends, but it's really unfortunate that we got the critical hit on the Clefable. Obviously not unfortunate from the standpoint of winning the game, but unfortunate from the standpoint of a highly competitive battle, because if we look back at, I'm going to skip back to where that turn happened. Where was it? Yeah, here. So if talk about a couple scenarios here very briefly. I'm not going to go into too much detail on this because it's really hard to determine how the battle would have turned out. If I were to go for the Iron Tail, he actually revealed to me after the battle that he was an offensive Clefable, and not just tank offense, like it was speedy offense. It was, I believe, it had a lot of speed investment, not much HP investment at all. I believe it was like 100 HP or something less than that, meaning that the Iron Tail damage would have done probably 80% or so to this Clefable. And in that context, that means I'm doing about 80% to Clefable. I lose my Mega Lopunny to that. Then I'm able to revenge him with probably my Azumarill. That's my best revenger, as I'm not going to go hard into Metagross, as there's a risk of being pursuit trapped and stuff like that by Weavile, and that's obviously my win con. So I go into my Azumarill, and based upon the fact that he would have taken so much damage from Iron Tail, I probably would have clicked Aqua Jet with Azumarill just to make sure, as I was speed creeping an uninvested speed Clefable, not a speedy Clefable, so I have no reason to risk taking a bunch of damage from Clef when I need Azu at full health to deal with the Latias. Now there, he could easily pivot into Venusaur, meaning I could go hard into my Gothitelle, but he could also double out. There's a lot of different combinations of moves that could happen if I did not get the crit here, making it impossible to know how the game would have actually turned out. I am under the impression that it would have been very, very close without the crit, which is really unfortunate because it was pretty one-sided, I felt, after the crit. As soon as the Venusaur was trapped, it was essentially over, as Metagross... as soon as Venusaur was trapped, it was essentially over, as Metagross was looking like a huge, huge threat, and he needed all the checks he could have for it, or all the switch-ins he could have for it, and more opportunities to switch into things that could weaken me. But that said, I don't think he had much for Metagross either, as if I look through his team, it looked like his best way to hit Metagross was the Gigavolt Havoc from the Latias. So I don't know. It's hard to know. As soon as I got +1 with Metagross, I believe it was GG. As soon as I would get +1 with Metagross, I believe it was GG, and that could have easily happened versus things like the Venusaur. It could have easily happened versus the Latias if I'm able to lure him into clicking Gigavolt Havoc versus my Gastrodon, maybe coming in to scout for it. It's really hard to know what would have happened, but I do feel good about my position. So yeah, really sorry about the hacks. Not exactly how I wanted to pick up a win, but it is what it is. Can't do much about it at this point, but good game, Togevoir. It was well played on your part for what you could do. Without a Clefable, you were down 6-5 from Team Preview, essentially, with how that happened, and not much you can really do about that, so that's too bad for sure. But as for us, we're now 4-5, so we're not that far in the gutter. We have a positive differential again, so that's pretty good. But we're 4-5, and with how the playoff picture is looking, we are 1 game out right now. We're 1 game out. There is a game that has not yet been played at the time of this recording that could mean if Crobat for the win loses to, I believe, Cloud Envy is who he plays, then we would actually be in the playoffs again with this 4-5 record. So this race for the 4th position in our conference is pretty intense. There's 3 of us right now that are heavily fighting for that spot, and with Togevoir losing this game, he's actually kind of sliding down into that range as well. So there might be 4 of us competing for 2 spots here within the next couple weeks, as Togevoir's upcoming matchups are pretty tough. So this playoff race is pretty crazy, but we're in a pretty good spot. We're not in a great spot by any means. Obviously, I'd like to be you know, like a 2-loss team, something like that, but we have 5 losses and we're still in the playoff picture, so that's not too bad, especially considering 3 of those losses were so close and could have really gone either way with just 1 different player, 1 slightly higher roll, 1 slightly lower roll, stuff like that. So not the worst thing in the world, but we are 4-5 +2. Next week we have a game against Cloud Envy, who has been struggling a little bit this season, so hopefully we can be able to pull off that win and get ourselves back to 500 finally. We haven't been 500 for since like we were 2-2, so week 4. that sucks. We'll do our best on that. But thanks for watching, guys. Toronto Raptors are back on the rise. We're going to try to make it to the playoffs and see if we can finish what we started 2 seasons ago and maybe pick up that first championship. So thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you all next week. Peace.